Right, so there's never been, in my opinion, a better time to learn to be a guitarist for a few reasons. Now, there's a few resources that I think are invaluable. One of them is YouTube, and I don't mean necessarily for lesson stuff or like the kind of nonsense that I do on here. What I mean this for is, say I was wanting to learn the solo to Living on a Prayer or whatever, I can go pull up a bunch of live videos of Bon Jovi playing Living on a Prayer and go and look at what Richie Sambora presumably actually plays. You know, really useful to be able to see the hand position and stuff like that. And you can use the slow down feature on YouTube. That's really, really useful. Now, that wasn't around when I was learning to play guitar, but I think it's a resource that I use these days, you know, like if I've been looking up Alan Holdsworth chords to try and see what he was playing, I 100% when I was going through kind of looking at how he plays home and stuff like that, looking at his hand positioning and trying to figure out, you know, okay, right, his hand's here, so therefore the chord is something like this. It's really, really helpful. Now, there's a reason that I think people talk about transcribing licks and talk about this being an important part of their playing. Almost anyone who achieves some level on guitar will have had to have done an element of this. And certainly early on, you know, there's loads of players that talk about playing along with cassettes or records and all this sort of stuff. I used to kind of play along with a record that I had of Thin Lizzy and sort of listen to bits and pieces over and over again and try and learn them. And as the years have gone on, there was a period when I used quite a lot of tab, but then I've come back to this idea, right, you just listen to the record and you try and figure out how you would play it. And that's kind of useful for a few reasons. I wanted to show you in this video how it is that I would go about learning a lick or something like that. One of the most useful devices for this is the digital audio workstation. So I use Reaper, so I'm going to show you a little bit on there as well. But yeah, so the first thing to do, I think, is pick something that you want to spend time learning. So this is also not a thing. So, you know, you read stories of people that have transcribed, you know, loads and loads and loads of stuff, you know, and especially in the jazz world, people say, you know, I learned whole solos and I moved them into every key. Now, I think for a lot of us, that's not a realistic use of our time. So for me personally, what I actually do these days is try to choose like a like bite-sized snippet of something or a shorter moment so that I can get the most out of that. So last night, for instance, I sat down and I was looking at the first couple of bars of the Lonely in the Night solo from Eric Johnson. And in the past, I've learnt this solo, but I have really honed in on just this first couple of bars. And I'll show you kind of the process, I guess, on this screen and try and talk you through some of that if I can figure out a way to do it. But yeah, so you pick your moment and pick one that is inspiring, that you want to spend time learning. So this is the other thing, like someone could tell you you need to learn Mike Stern's Chromosome and transcribe that, or transcribe this Randy Brecker solo. Realistically, I think you should probably focus on spending time learning the things that either you need to learn or that you really want to learn. So, you know, you don't need to transcribe a Marty Friedman solo if you don't not wanting to play like that. So it's obvious, isn't it? But pick things that you really love. So for me, that might be an Eric Johnson solo or Jonathan Kreisberg or something like that. And focus first on the very small moments. So maybe like the first 2 bars, 4 bars. And something like a 20-minute session, 30-minute session is probably the most you should be aiming for, I think, unless you get really into it. So this could be totally manageable. And if you've got less time than that, it doesn't mean you can't get just as much out of this. So you're not just learning a lick, you're actually practicing the skills of learning a lick when you do this sort of thing. So pick your little moment. And then what I like to do is sort of I play the first few notes of it on whatever device I'm using. The digital audio workstation is best, but YouTube can kind of work on a phone as well. If you double tap left or double tap forward, you can go 10-second increments either way, which is a little bit too much, I find. It would be better for me if it was like a 5-second increment. But in any case, yeah, you can go 10 seconds. So you could say, right, I know it starts here. So you listen, listen to the part, and then come back. And then you try and find it on your fretboard. You figure out what key you're in, and then you just start to listen to the phrase and try and play the phrase back. Now, this has been a huge part of my playing for forever, and you can see that obviously what I'm describing to you is, in essence, recreating music that you've just heard, which is why people talk about transcribing a tool, because this is pretty much the most musical thing you can do, to be able to repeat a phrase of music that you've heard. So you listen to the phrase, you figure out how to play a couple of notes of it. Once you've got those notes right, you might come back to the start of the phrase and listen again. You try and pick up like an extra note each time. That's how I do it. I don't know if there are other people that do it in different ways. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. For me, I don't write this stuff down when I'm in this process. I'm literally just listening, trying to remember, looking at the fretboard, seeing what's happened, maybe like singing the line. Then if it's fast stuff, this is the really cool thing about YouTube. You can slow it down to 75% speed or 50% speed. The cool thing about Reaper is you can go even kind of smaller increments, so you can just slow it down BPM wise. And what I do if it's like a longer passage, so like one that I'll talk about in a minute, I will break down and listen for the bits that I can hear, which tend to be sort of, you might get like 3 or 4 notes at a time, and sort of just the same process as if you were doing with a normal kind of speed phrase. The faster phrase, you kind of pick notes as you go along and you say, right, this is the first 4 notes, and you kind of figure out how you would play that. And then you want to kind of incrementally add a couple of extra notes at a time. And you might have to keep going back and refreshing until you get to the stage where you've probably, this might take a whole session depending on the length of the phrase, and you go, right, it starts like this, and this is the movement and all that sort of stuff. So I'll just show you actually now. From Eric Johnson, from this part here, this phrase here took me a long time to figure out, and so what I was doing was just listening to, you know, it came out first, I got that part, and that's triplets, and then I recognized, okay, then it's going to a different rhythm, something like that. And you kind of break it up into little bite-sized chunks until that's not quite right. So you have to like then try and play along with the thing at a slower tempo. Until you can sort of play along with it reliably, and don't necessarily worry too much about the timing. You're sort of just trying to match it up feel-wise with what you're hearing. And certainly with these faster phrases, when you slow them down, sometimes they don't make a whole bunch of sense rhythmically. So I like to just think about them, especially if it's like a pentatonic thing here, as like an amount of notes. And then I listen for like sequences within that. And then there's this other little bite. And yeah, literally just joining together these little bite-sized chunks so that by the end of this session, you can start to then play the whole phrase. And then gradually kind of build up the tempo. That's how it works for me. I'll just show you in the digital audio workstation that I use now, Reaper, how I kind of do this. The audio might get a little bit less good from this point in, but that's what I would suggest doing. So just pick something that A, you really like the sound of, and B, that catches your interest. And then slowly, you know, just take small chunks at a time that are achievable, and say, right, I just want to learn kind of 1 bar of this solo today, or 2 bars, And you may find that the session goes better than you thought it was, but keep the target small so that you can feel like you've achieved something, and come back and do this kind of daily. And you'll gradually find that these skills improve, so that hopefully this becomes a thing that you want to keep doing. But yeah, that was the phrase that I was looking at. Let me just show you now how I would do this. Step one for me would be, I would go to the tune. I've got this lovely Matteo Sasato thing playing as an advert, as Neural DSP like to advertise to me. Take the tune Eric Johnson, Lonely in the Night, whatever you're looking for, and I like to kind of just copy that, and you can get these sites which have dodgy adverts on them, like converto.io, and you can then convert that into an MP3, and then I would drag that into and what I would then do is find the moment that I'm looking for. Which is there. Let me just turn this down a bit. And it happens here. So I'm going to create a marker here, and then you might maybe even want to create a marker for where it ends. So you say, right, this is my kind of session for today, and you can loop these in the digital audio workstation, which is really cool. The other thing I do is I would slow it down in this kind of way. So I would repeatedly kind of just go and you know, in that way you can kind of figure out what level you want to be hearing this stuff at, so that you can play along with it and still hear it. My tempo went weird there. And you know, once you've kind of, you go through, as I say, and you think, right, is that? And you kind of look at each part of it and figure out what's going on. Okay. Something like that. And then once you've got the phrase, you can start to then speed it up. So you could go in increments of 10 BPM or... That was okay. Okay, and then I could speed it up gradually or faster or whatever. Nice, okay, and then at some point you get close to the tempo of the thing and you're still listening, checking, is this right? So that's basically the process, and let's try it with something new. So I'm going to go up to the front of here and start the marker. That's the length of the phrase that I want to check out. So we get like that. Yeah, so that's how literally I just go through and I gradually and add kind of the phrase as we go. And I'm kind of there halfway through that phrase before I knew it. And basically I just focus on this phrase for like 15-20 minutes, and that might be my entire practice for the day. But that's how I would learn licks, and that's how I'd encourage you to learn licks. You could write this stuff down kind of at the break of the session, but I like to try and keep it in the memory for at least the duration of the session, so you're not kind of just relying on reading back what you've already written. So let me know your thoughts in the comments about how you learn licks, whether you think it's important or not. And I'll catch you in another video soon. Back to learning this.